Good morning. Good morning. Kenny and Carolyn, it's good that you guys are here. I'm glad that you could join us. I know it's a busy time of year with us getting ready for testing, so appreciate that you were able to take the time. It is 10 o'clock, and I want to make sure that given everybody's busy schedules, I get started on time. And if there are opportunities for other people to jump in, then I'll be monitoring that. I have the privilege of being able to facilitate a conversation that is pretty timely. In Arizona, as you know, we have all felt some pain points around drivers and being able to procure drivers, get them trained so that they're licensed appropriately to drive. And then we have some issues around keeping them under contract once we get them. I know for Stanfield in particular, we are competing with commercial drivers. And some of the companies around with ag and dairy that can pay a lot more than we can pay as a school district for those people that we've trained. So in looking at possible solutions and some different ways of looking at the problem, I was introduced to Trust Ed, and I'm actually going to be turning it over to Taylor and Brandon, who have some information to share with you about a potential solution that rural school communities here in Arizona might be able to tap into. This is an exploratory call, so they're going to be providing you with some information. If you're accessing the recording after the live session, please know that it is the start of a conversation, and we are happy to continue to ensure that your questions are answered if they're not answered on this particular call. And I know that Taylor and Brandon will stand ready to answer anything both during the session and after as well. So without further ado, I want to spend the bulk of the time with them providing some context for this exploration webinar. And so Taylor and Brandon, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Melissa. And Kenny and Carolyn, real quickly, if you want to briefly give me an update to kind of where your districts are and what your role is, I would appreciate that so I know who I'm speaking to. We'll start with Carolyn, and then Kenny, you could jump in after.
Gosh, this is a small group, huh? I'm Carolyn Stewart, Superintendent, Bullhead City School District.
And you, Ken?
I'm Kenny Hayes. I'm the superintendent of Patagonia School Districts. It's down by the Mexican border by Nogales.
Okay, yeah, I've driven down through there a few times. My wife's from Mexico. We go to Rocky Point and to Chihuahua frequently, so I've been in that side of the town a few times. I live in Phoenix, Ahwatukee area, so I'm a Phoenix native. Taylor is an ASU grad. He's also a Phoenix native. But our company, do you guys, either Kenny or Carolyn, by raise a hand, do you remember the green cabs, the discount cabs that were so, popular here in Phoenix for a long time? No, they were in Tucson, Marana, they were all over. I was the director of transportation for those cabs many, many years ago. And when they brought me in to compete with Uber and Lyft because they were getting killed. And they essentially asked, what do we do? My thoughts at the time were, you're losing significantly in the industry that you're trying to survive in, which you need to pivot, you need to move, because no one will be calling cabs from the bars or from games anymore. And student transportation became my primary area of focus. However, when I pulled an audit of drivers, we saw drivers on terror watch lists, stolen Social Security, sexual crime registries, and I had to shut down the entire program, fire every driver, and start a new program where I did all of the credentialing myself. And I only allowed my managers to drive because it was such a problem. Here in Phoenix and Tucson and Casa Grande, the places I'm most familiar with in Arizona, this is a major problem. So Kenny or Carolyn, are you guys experiencing challenges with driver shortages with McKinney-Vento? Where's your main transportation challenges at the moment?
Right now we're all right, but we're basically every year we're a driver away from being in trouble. So that's why I'm here, because I want to be ready when it does come up.
We're in a consortium with Colorado River Union High School District, to which our schools feed in. And kind of like Kenny said, we're on any given day a driver away from having enough. But Melissa also stated the things that apply to us. We'll train people, and then they can go across the river and make more money in the public transit in Laughlin. Sometimes they go to even the city, but part of it is that most of our driver positions are part-time. And so younger drivers, they need full-time jobs, and that's part of the problem.
So is that microtransit a big area of focus for you as far as
Pardon
cleaning
me?
up your microtransit situations? Your non-bus work, the kids that are falling outside of school district lines or homeless,
No,
foster care?
no, we have a little bit of that, but we have a few kids that are homeless that live outside of our district, but we use vans for that.
Okay.
And until that gets resolved. No, that's not our problem. Our problem is keeping drivers,
Bus drivers.
and training them and then keeping them. And part of that is, as I say, we're across the river from Laughlin, Nevada, where salaries are higher and some of the jobs are full time. We're just down the road from Needles, California, and so they can make more money driving for California schools. So that's part of it. But part of it is just the fact that our folks are our positions, most of them are part-time positions. And so getting people trained and keeping them is an issue.
Well, that's kind of the main thing we've seen across the country is that drivers in general are hard to come by. And when they do, you have to spend a lot of money on paying for their onboarding, their background checks, their fingerprint cards, their drug screens, all of that. But what we've realized as a company is that the educators that work at these schools can solve this problem for you. When we did our initial research and we were interviewing educators and transportation departments across the state, we started to realize that the educators, the parapros, the substitutes, the teachers that work for the school districts were coming from geographically dispersed areas around the community. So when kids fall into need of transportation that maybe don't fit on a bus route, we're able to pair them with the teacher who happens to live nearby. So if you just imagine your city and the amount of kids that are coming from different parts of that city into a school, you very likely have teachers that live in those same communities that these kids do. And our technology will recognize that and will allow you to pair students that live nearby these educators who are coming to these schools. And in just a moment, I'll show you kind of what that looks like from the technology perspective. But when we do this, we partner with a local agency. So we're live in multiple states, but we're exploring partnering with Melissa and her organization to run this program in the state of Arizona. And what that would look like for you is essentially Melissa and her organization would be a vendor to your district. And you would be given access to our technology platform that you would be paying Melissa and her organization. It creates what we call a circular economy. So I'm going to briefly show you what that looks like. And give me just 1 second while I pull this up. I apologize for not having that up for you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now as well. Is everyone able to see my screen? Okay, so Kenny and Caroline, if you can see this screen here, you'll notice this is a very simplified diagram of how the program works. You're given access to the program and the technology that we're about to show you. And the technology comes from ARSA. The districts will have access to the technology where they'll be able to allow educators to create profiles, similar to a social media profile. As they do, they include things such as their credentialing, and they serve as contracted drivers. Therefore, you don't have to pay for their onboarding, their background checks, any of the credentialing that goes into these drivers. Most of them are credentialed as drivers, as teachers, but they'll have a few additional things that will be the responsibility of ARSA to credential them as drivers. But once they're credentialed as drivers, they show up on a map and are paired with students who are in need of transportation. Oftentimes, this is McKinney-Vento, ESSA, SPED students on the spectrum, or others that just don't fit onto a school bus. Now, as those educators are commuting to and from work, they're solving your problem of your bus driver shortages as well. And with our case studies that we have access to, and we were happy to show you in Oregon as an example, they've used our program to make their buses more efficient. So buses can focus on the local work, and these more larger geographic regions are served by educators who are simply commuting to work. And then your transportation department uses what they've already had in their budget, and they pay for a vendor similar to how you would pay for any vendor per mile. Only now the proceeds are going to a partner, ARSA. And they're being able to spend that money and invest that money back into your schools and back into your school districts. So that money stays within this cycle and flows freely from you back to your own employees and to your ARSA partner, who can invest that money into additional programs that help your students. In Oregon, as an example, they're doing things like homework helpers for teachers in these programs as well. So that's kind of how the program works. And I'll give you a little anecdotal story for how I started TrustEd. Again, I was working at the cab company, and I was driving students myself because the credentialing was such a problem. And I was fully credentialed, and I was transporting 3 students that were in a very difficult life situation. Mother was going through chemo. And when I say mother, they called her mother, but she was aunt. Mom and dad were both incarcerated. And the children were moved to 3 different schools, one for fighting and aggression, one for severe autism, nonverbal, and the other was in her primary school that was somewhat close to home. But I was transporting these 3 students, and the nonverbal autistic child every day would fight to not get in the vehicle on her way home. She didn't want to go home. Loved going to school, didn't want to go home. And Caroline, I could see, you've seen this type of thing before. It happens frequently. And to get her into the vehicle, it was a challenge. And a driver's not allowed to touch a child. They can't physically pick them up, put them in the vehicle, strap them into the seatbelt. And that was the paraprofessional's job. And this parapro was fantastic. Every day she would help me with this. Until one day I said, when I leave, what do you do? And she said, I clock out and I go home. She was paid minimum wage. This was years ago, but it was a tough situation for her. Just turned out that she happened to live in the same area as these students that loved her. Right. So I talked to the principal, I talked to my boss, and long story short, we contracted a paraprofessional to start transporting her special needs nonverbal autistic children who, 1, she was perfect for, and 2, she lived nearby. It was convenient. The scenario all just kind of worked out. So that's where the idea of TrustEd was born. It was simply utilizing your trained employees, who are the best people to work with children, to help get these children to and from school. And that was the whole purpose of our program. So hearing that, Kenny and Caroline, is there anything that comes to mind or questions that you want to see before I jump into the technology, or things that you just want to get an answer to before I continue? Kenny, let me ask you, in your community, do you have an idea of the way that something like this could be utilized? I mean, is your brain like starting to see, if I have parapros here, if I have teachers there, substitutes there, does this seem like something that would inspire a new program, or are you more along the lines of we use school buses for everything?
No, this could be used in certain situations for us.
Fantastic. So
Brandon, I'll jump in.
technology.
Brandon, I'll jump in really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just introduce myself real briefly. My name's Taylor Bouvet. So I've been working with Brandon for a little over 10 years. I am on the insurance side. So I'm the one that procured the insurance and meticulously crafted with several carriers to put together an insurance solution that obviously, ensures the liability for running this program. And I think one of the most unique things that we've seen from implementation in Oregon is not only solving the solution of, safe, reliable transportation for students, but there's been such a major impact on educators. And what I mean by that is, there's no surprise that even in Arizona, they're coming out with ways to provide more income for teachers because they're just not making enough. And, the technology and the solution is giving these teachers and educators a way of making life-changing money just on their commute to and from work. And what I mean by that is we have a teacher in Oregon who, over a 9-month period, they're going to make over $17,000 driving kids to and from school. It's about a little over an 18-mile trip to from school. And when we asked her, hey, what are you going to do with this additional income? She had a very crazy, background and situation, but she said, I'm finally going to be able to put a down payment on a home. So we're hearing a lot of those types of stories in the community. And I just can't think of a, better way to solve a great problem as far as, again, getting these students to and from school, but also rewarding the educators so they don't have to, drive Uber or have that part-time, job on the weekend. So I just wanted to kind of share my 2 cents of, interviewing some of these, educators and talking to them through the administrators and, the change that we are trying to bring, within our program. So with that, I'll turn it back to Brandon. He can kind of show the technology and how it's used on a day-to-day basis, but that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. And I do apologize. Sometimes I get into the details of this program, so that's why I try and check in. If there's specifics that you're curious about, please stop me and ask me. The program does a lot, and it does a lot for a lot of people, including generating revenue for your existing staff members. So if you're curious about things, please do ask me specifics. What you're looking at now on the screen, this is what the technology looks like. So when you log in, you're going to see kind of your school list. This is the list of schools that are in my test platform. So these are all test platform schools. Adding a new school is very simple. Same with passengers. You'll see a list of all of your passengers, add a passenger. Same with drivers, list of drivers, add drivers. So once you've enrolled in our program, it's very simple to start recruiting drivers to our system. Caroline and Kenny, if you were to go into our passenger and add a new passenger, this is the information you already have. This is your students that you get transportation requests for, whether they're homeless, foster care, special needs, or just normal students that can't fit on a school bus. You type in their address, you fill out a profile, and then the great thing about our tech platform is that it involves all parties. So you already have the mom and dad's phone number, right? In order to place transportation, that's a requirement. Within our system, once you've put in that phone number, it sends a text message to those parents prompting them to download the parent app, where they'll be able to live GPS track all of their trips. They'll get automated text messaging, letting them know when their student was picked up, dropped off, etc. So all of the parental communication is automated through our mobile app, which will kind of take off some of the administrative burden that your team may face today. They will be able to see and live track everything. Our drivers, we can create a new driver link. This is a really fun tool that we can utilize. So for example, I could just put in a name, email, and password and a phone number, and it would send a link to any potential drivers. So maybe if you're at a all hands on deck kind of meeting, or you want to send out a social media blast that, hey, if you're interested in making some money while you commute to work, this is what we need. Once we have this information, profiles are began, and a text message would be sent to the drivers so they could start building their profile. So that's how the tech kind of collects the data, right? And when you add a school, it'll ask you for the school's start and end times. So now you'll have schools, their start and end times, students, drivers, and parents attached to those students, just by kind of filling out the technology as it goes in order. But the fun part to all of this is the create new trip. So this is the exciting part of the technology. Once you have your data in the system, you have some drivers, you have some students. Our show map function here is what's getting us all types of recognition. It may look a little cluttered right now, but we're going to narrow it down. All of the S's that you see, these are our schools. Val Vista Lakes over here, over by where I live in Ahwatukee. You can click on any of the schools. That's the Ahwatukee Test School. All of these blue D's are our drivers, right? And I use Marvel characters as my drivers. So this one is Sam Wilson. Over here, we have Natasha Romanova. And these will be your teachers who fill out their profiles. Same thing with the P's. Those are our passengers. Now, as I said, this list may be a little bit confusing. Well, not confusing, but scattered. So the first thing you're going to do is say, hey, maybe we already know what students we're going to be transporting, right? So the first thing, my screen is not allowing me to click on anything. Give me a second here, guys. My screen's freezing on me. I can't even click on the Zoom meeting anymore. I apologize, guys. Can you hear me? Is my audio?
Yeah,
working?
we can still hear you.
Mhm.
Anyway, let me,
Okay,
while
there
you're
you go.
doing, you got it?
So-
Okay.
Yeah, I just had to refresh my screen. So now I've selected a school. So I'm going to show you again, the show map will get rid of all the other schools. Right? And then when I select a student, it will get rid of all the other students. Right? So I could put in Champ and maybe I want to look at Molly as well. And now when I show the map, it's going to have all of my drivers, but only those 2 passengers. Right? And you can zoom in as far as you want. And on this map, as an example, we'd see a driver here, Wanda Maximov, who happens to live right by this student, Molly, and would be ideal candidate for picking up Molly. So what we would do then is we would come over here and we would say we want to build a round trip, and we would select the driver. Then we would select when the trip's going to start. We'll call it the first. And you could have this trip go for the rest of the year, for 1 month, for 2 months. It will also bypass all of your school holidays. So when we build a year-round trip, it'll be the same driver every morning and every afternoon. And then after that trip has been built, it's going to show you all of the trip dynamics, of which you will see here. So you'll see how much the trip is going to cost your school district for the first direction, how much it's going to cost your school district for the second direction, and what the round trip daily cost will be. Of that, 40% will be going to your existing driver, and our Google Analytics show when the trip will actually start, when the student needs to be dropped off, and this is based on the school information. So we have an 8 o'clock start time, which would mean a 7:45 a.m. drop-off time. School gets out at 2, so it would be a pickup time of 2:05. All of this data is right there. And then when you select offer the trip, it gets sent in a text message to the driver. Any questions about this? Anybody? Because this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the technology right here. No questions? Okay, well, I mean, that's kind of what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little slow on the uptake here. What determines your costs?
So the costs are set by our partners. Normally, we call it a 4-3-2-1 model. So by a 4-3-2-1 model, it's $4 per mile for the first student, $3 per mile for the second student, $2 per mile for the third, and then 1 for all additional students that are being transported. And normally there's only going to be 3 students in the vehicle unless the driver happens to have a van, and they could fit more students into the vehicle. But you're going to be paying per student per mile, if that makes sense. Did we get a new member joining, Mary?
We did. Mary Faley is the superintendent of a district in southern Arizona.
Well, hello, Mary. Do you want to introduce yourself and say hello? Let us know kind of what your focus is.
Yes, and I'm a little late to the party. My name is Mary Faley. I'm the superintendent and principal of Sonoyta Elgin Elementary School District. We're a K-8 district, and we do not, we subcontract with Patagonia. I see Kenny's here for transportation services currently.
Well, wonderful. We were just kind of going over our platform, and the high level is our technology allows you to identify students in need of transportation that live by educators that are transporting themselves to the same school every day, so that they can pair up and connect with those students and take them to and from school and make some money during their commutes. So that is our solution, and our technology kind of does all of that for you. And before I get into any more of the technology, Kenny or Caroline, do you have any specific questions, or even Mary, about any of the things you've seen so far?
So of the 421 model that you were talking about, how much of that goes to the driver and how much of that goes to you and how much of that goes to ARSA?
Yeah, very good question. So the driver typically makes 40% of what we're doing. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to take you into Oregon Routes. They're one of our live clients. Is everybody still able to see my technology as it updates? Okay, so the driver compensation piece is going to be tracked through our system as well. So any of the trips, and this is the one that Taylor was talking about, Tasha, she just started driving for us recently. But if you'll notice, she's making $58 twice daily because the students that she's transporting live pretty far away. Each trip shows whether a student was no-showed, picked up, and dropped off, or otherwise completed. And I don't know, let me go back to that last page. I apologize. The driver compensation here, when I select Tasha, it'll show me her her driver records and what she's earned through our program. So I got to date this back to February, and we can look at what she made in the month of February. And it'll show you each student that she's transported, what dollar amount she's made, and what she's owed. So this again will be ARSA's responsibility to pay these drivers. And that all of their activity is being tracked in our system.
He just froze, Taylor.
I think we
Wanna
lost,
do that?
yeah, I think we lost Brandon. Doreen, did you want to interject with anything? I think you had something you wanted to say.
It was just before when Brandon was freezing the last time. He just really needs a blanket today or something, I guess.
Yeah.
As someone who partners and supports Trust Ed in this work, and as an educator and having worked for an educational service center, I think one of the things that's key to this, to go to your question, Kenny, is that if you take a paraprofessional or who goes to school at the same time as the kids and all of those things, and as Carolyn was saying before, you have these part-time folks who need full-time work. This is a way to be able to take those part-time folks who maybe work 4 hours a day at the school district and be able to supplement their income in a way that gives them a full-time salary. However, when ARSA is paying them, they're paying them as an independent contractor, which is a key component to how the entire process works. So it doesn't impact your salary line item budget, and it doesn't mean that anybody has to begin to start to pay other costs in terms of benefits and things like that too.
And then Kenny, to go back to your point, generally how the model's set up is 40% goes to the educator or the driver, 60% goes to the affiliate, in this case, you know, ARSA, and then Trust Ed gets a 80 cent per mile rate is what they is all that they take.
Taylor, can I, and these are some of the questions that I had when we initially had our call. So for those of you that are on the call with us, hopefully you're thinking the same things that I was thinking. Liability in a situation like this is something that first was my first question. So Taylor, can you talk a little bit about the insurance that is provided to the program?
Yeah, so you know, as you may or may not know, for the insurance industry, probably the toughest exposures to insure either, you know, youth or elderly. So you know, we've been working on this program for a little over 5 years. We partnered with a carrier that has customized a program specifically built for the exposure. And when we think about the liability, the key is what Doreen pointed out is, you know, during the commute in the morning and after school, these are 1099 drivers, right? So they are not, you know, W-2 employees. And so what we're covering is, since they're driving someone else's or their own vehicle, this is not an owned vehicle of the school or of, you know, our affiliate partner. So the word that comes to mind in the coined term in insurance is called hired and non-owned auto. It is not an auto that you own. It is a hired or non-owned auto exposure. So the liability covers, any type of, accident that driver may commit, whether they hit property, whether they hit another person's vehicle. That hired and non-owned auto liability is going to pay out. It's also going to pay out for the medical bills of the driver that they hit, of the driver themselves, of the student that is in the car. And then we've got supplemental insurance on top of that as well. So that would be excess or umbrella coverage that would go on top. So depending on the state, there's usually requirements on the amount of millions you need when you're transportating students. And then the other key coverage is SAM coverage, or sexual abuse and molestation coverage. So, that would be in the event of any kind of accusation or any type of event where, the student was in a situation where a claim would be derived. And the way that, we help make this a safer exposure is we suggest that all of our affiliates have a, camera. Cameras are extremely cheap. They're anywhere from, $40 to $50, or they can be even cheaper if you guys have a program. But basically, the educator has a camera that shows, everything that's going on. That makes them feel more comfortable, makes the exposure, very straightforward. So as far as the insurance goes, those are the lines that we've put in place and partnered with the carrier. So I'm the one that delivered and created that program. And then, Brandon is part of the technology, but we both come together to offer this to our affiliates. So we make sure that they are covered from a liability standpoint.
Any other questions on insurance or liability?
I'll add that the technology tracks all of the key features that determine your insurance costs moving forward. So as your drivers are using our mobile app and completing the trips, not only can the administrator live GPS track the trips, but the mobile app is live tracking it as well. And it's comparing speed to speed limit ratios. It's comparing your aggressive accelerating, aggressive braking, on-time performances. And can everyone still see my screen just by thumb up? I apologize for the internet challenges, but if you see this little car under the action button here, when you pull that up, you could see the exact trip that the driver took. So any of these trips that have been completed, you can go in and look at the exact route taken by any driver. It'll show any additional turns they've made, any extra stops that they may have taken. And as I scroll out here, you'll see that this was one of our longer trips, but this is where the trip starts, this S, and it'll timestamp that the trip started at 7:18. The student was picked up at 7:26. And the student was then dropped off at school. Well, I guess multiple students were dropped off at school at 7:53. And if you'll notice here, the driver starts her day and commutes to school along the route at which she picks up a passenger. At the end of the day, the trip is the complete opposite, only the driver doesn't have to go anywhere to pick the student up. She's automatically at the school, student gets in the vehicle, and they drive home. So this is the ideal situation and how it's being used currently in other states. And that's our thought process for you, is that sending a bus all the way out here 20 some miles to pick up two kids who don't happen to live near a large enough subset of students in need of transportation, it makes no sense to send a bus out there.
Yeah, and I think
especially when you have vehicles already coming this direction, you might as well utilize what's already on the road and offer more money to your existing people. So
yeah, I think it's unique in the aspect of when we have rolled this out to districts, they've kind of made the comment of, these educators were already commuting next to these students, they just didn't know it. And so when you populate this map and you kind of conceptualize how this program works, I think from the affiliate and the educator's perspective, they're going, you're telling me that I can make, up to $17,000 or even more. We've got, educators making even more for just commuting to work. And I think that's a really, one part about how special this program is. I think the bigger impact is, this is staying in the economy. It's not going to a third-party vendor. It's going directly to ARSA or whoever that affiliate would be, and it can fund other programs, right? Besides that teacher being paid, it goes back to tutor helpers or any other solution that you guys would deem, a program to champion.
Can you talk a little bit about the training that would be provided to the teachers, what that looks like, what would be required of the teachers that were driving?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll briefly turn this over to Doreen because her team is the one that does all of our training. And I'll introduce Doreen. Doreen is representing Navigo on this call, who is a contracted partner of TrustEd. So when a partner decides to come on board and offer the TrustEd program, such as Arizona or in the state of Arizona, Doreen and her team would be the ones you would be working with to roll the program out. So I'll introduce Doreen, and Doreen, you can kind of explain how the training looks.
Sure. Thanks, Brandon. Hi, everybody. So we know that training is a key component to this. There's two pieces to it. One is the technology piece to it, and then making sure that everybody meets the Arizona requirements for training and onboarding and safety, and their cars might need to be inspected and things like that. So we work with the affiliate, in this case ARSA, potentially, to make sure that all of those things happen. And so we have a team of folks who will do training for the ARSA. I'm going to use the word staff in a very general term to implement the program. For the drivers, the technology component of that and how they access it. And we're also available for people for technical assistance and any glitches that happen and things like that. And we also help to do the research on what might your State Department of Education or State Department of Transportation require for folks to be able to do this, because it is in some states a disruptor to educational transportation, and not everybody's very used to it. So we try to work with them also so that they can see A, the benefits, B, how it works, and C, how it really, really can solve some problems for school districts. So you have, we have a team of 7 of us who are working with the different affiliates to help out.
And I think it's important to notice too that on Doreen's team, they're very impressive individuals. One is Jason has been with school districts for how long, Doreen, working on transportation in Texas?
Probably 20 years.
And he has his background as a transportation director, and he's led many initiatives for new rollouts for transportation in Texas. We also have someone who works at a school district on the IT side, and they're out of Connecticut, but also very hands-on and helping you with training for your technology purposes.
And understanding how your current student information systems can interact with the TrustEd platform, and how easy it would be to grab all of the data that you need. So whomever in your school district takes that responsibility, it should be pretty seamless. Yeah, you've got a great team in Navigo. Our education background, transportation background is extensive. I didn't want to take up a lot of time, promoting ourselves. So
they have decades of experience in leadership and transportation and even Black Ops military operations. So very detailed, very impressive background for their team. And they are our rollout partners. So they will be working with you hand in hand as you launch the program.
Thanks. Carolyn, it looks like you have your hand up.
I do. Melissa, have you had any conversations with the trust regarding this option?
No, we are in the beginning stages of exploring and wanted to see what the interest was from the field, whether or not it was a solution that resonated before we went too far forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think when they were talking about insurance, and for many of our districts, of course, the trust is our insurance agent. And I was also sitting here thinking, how this might apply to my district. Most of my bus routes and my students live within our city limits. So, this isn't necessarily something that sounds really good for my district right now. However, I was thinking about Cole Young down in Mojave Valley, and he and I had a conversation the other day about a McKinney-Vento student, and he's sending a bus clear through Bullhead to the bridge to Laughlin to pick up a McKinney-Vento student. And so, in that kind of a situation, so I will certainly put a bug in Cole's ear.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about, speaking of the school sites, responsibility? What would the school be required to do? I have an understanding of what ARSA and their responsibilities would be, but there's got to be some connection with the school site and the person at the site. What does that look like?
First of all, Carolyn, I've met with the trust a few times. Back in my time at the TAA, I've been to Flagstaff a few times. Patrick Fleming is also a big endorser of what we're building. I've met with Casa Grande and a bunch of other very important people for building this program. They've taught me a lot about Arizona and the problems that they have and the things that they need. The trust does not carry insurance for this work, just so you know. They carry insurance for buses and for vehicles. This is a non-hired, non-owned insurance platform. So Taylor and his group do our insurance. The trust does not offer insurance for this type of program. I've met with them a few times, but they are a bus insurer. They won't cover this program.
No, I knew they wouldn't. I just didn't want us to be considering something that would be in conflict relative to the liability that you've already talked about. So if you've had conversations with them already, at least they're aware of this opportunity.
Yeah, and Carolyn, to address the insurance part, it's a total carve out. So how it works from any kind of school district is the policies are carved out from what they currently have in place, and there's exclusion separating the exposure so that you are just insuring what Brandon mentioned, the hired and non-owned auto risk from school.
And to answer the other question around what the school district's responsibilities would be, well, one is you would hope that there would be a partnership between ARSA and the school districts in terms of recruiting educators in the schools to be drivers. So I think that there's that piece, offering this as an opportunity to them. And then the second part is to do the uploading of student information and making sure that you've got the students in the right places with all the right contact information and all of that kind of thing. So the other thing I think that's important is to know is that students can go, not students, the school districts can go into the technology and they can see all the same things that Brandon was talking about. So if, for example, somebody is a little late to work and the student hasn't shown up or something, they can see where they are. So I think that's another level of responsibility, which you probably already do. So I don't think it's anything different from what they currently do.
Yeah, the technology will track all of that as well. There's an element to it for our trouble tickets that I won't really get into too much, but if a trip has failed to start, say a trip was supposed to start at 7 a.m. and it's 7:15, there'll be automated alert messages to the admin and to the driver saying, hey, you're supposed to start a trip 15 minutes ago. So you'll see it here. It'll pop up as a trouble ticket. You can call and it'll be both on the affiliate portal and the district portal. So I could have explained that better when we started, but your district portal will allow you to see everything that you're looking at here. And this is the affiliate portal, which is what Melissa and her team would have access to, but your district will have access to the same data. Your district would be able to do all of it or none of it, in other words. So your district could call Melissa and say, hey, here's a student we need a transportation for, and then you could email her that student's information. Melissa's team could then input that student and identify a driver, or your district could do that directly from the web-based platform. So it's how involved you want to be. We have the full team of people that can help you build those trips and help you with that info, but you could also do it yourself directly from the platform. we're the only platform that allows you to select a driver. Any other vendor will try and put a driver with a student that you don't really have any say over. But for obvious reasons, especially in the world of special needs with nonverbal autistic children, matching them with parapros is a match made in heaven. Your parapros are making minimum wage and they're begging for more money, and you're probably losing them for 50-cent raises elsewhere occasionally, just because money is so tight for them. But when you're offering them $50+ a day, transporting to and from school, it really resets the recruiting measures, and it'll allow you to hold on and retain staff a lot better as well.
Any other questions?
I noticed, I missed the first half hour and I noticed that it's being recorded. Can I get a copy of that?
Yes, we'll
And-
send it out in our newsletter.
Okay, and then who would I contact if I wanted further information? If I had questions after viewing that recording?
You could
Melissa,
you
that'd
can
be
contact either Brandon or myself, and we can give Melissa contact information for follow-up as well, or Doreen's team too. I mean, we can just put all of us on there.
Okay,
I'll make sure that that information goes out with the recording, Mary.
thank you.
Yeah, Melissa is the hub. Everything will run through Melissa, but we are a part of her team on this.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
What would the cost be?
It's free up front. So there's no upfront buy-in for you, Kenny, or any other districts in the state, but you just pay per mile as you use the technology.
And what's the per mile cost?
It's the 4-3-2-1 model we discussed. So in this
Oh, okay.
instance, yeah, in this instance, there's only one student getting picked up, so it's $4 per mile for that one trip. If there was 2 students being picked up, it would be 4 + 3 or $7 per mile for the trip. 3 students, 4 + 3 + 2, $9 per mile for the trip. But it's a per student per mile, and it's less than, when you compare it directly apples to apples, it's less than hop, skip, and driver ever driven. So it's similar to what the industry already charges for this work, only the money's going back to your own staff members.
So if a kid's not picked up for a day, then you don't get charged for that kid for that day.
Correct. Correct. And there's no variable billing. So if you remember back to the trip builder where it showed the trip cost, it doesn't matter if the street gets closed and the driver has to drive an additional 5 miles. Every single day that the driver takes that trip, they've agreed to the contracted price. So every day the trip is the exact same regardless of the path the driver chooses to take. The price is based off of what you're seeing here, the direct line from start to finish. But no variable billing. The billing will be the same for every trip once that trip has been built and accepted.
That sort of budget certainty is also a plus to this kind of work, and also a headache reliever. I know sometimes as superintendents and principals, transportation can add a little bit of a headache factor to your daily responsibilities. I don't mean that like a migraine headache. It's just something else that needs to be done as a good leader. And knowing that you've got budget certainty there can be really helpful.
Any other questions?
I was still on mute and I was trying to talk. I apologize. The McKinney-Vento activity that someone mentioned earlier, in this state, I was very intimately a part of building the 100-day reports. When you hear the word 100-day report, does anyone know what that means, or has anyone dealt with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our system auto generates it for you. So any of the reporting that you need for the federal government to acquire funding, you could simply select the school district, choose the school, and then this Oregon Roots doesn't happen to have any students in McKinney-Vento. But when you do, it'll auto-populate the entire report for that student for the 100 days. That if you wanted a 30-day, 100-day, 60-day, it'll generate the report for that student automatically. And it'll show everything that the federal government requires for you to receive funding for that person, for that student. So our system auto-generates the McKinney-Vento reporting for you. Great question, Paul.
So I hear you mentioning, staff, doing the driving. Has there been consideration of, parents carpooling? I can see some pros and cons to that. So if you had a parent who was coming from a distance and was willing to do a carpool, is that an option? And like, why or not? It is.
Yeah, so any driver that you add to the system doesn't have to be an educator, it can be.
Okay.
But as an example, our partners in other states, they're utilizing family members, right? Like their own fathers, their own sisters, their own spouses, people that they can trust and that they know are safe, that they can fully credential. It's up to you. You can credential whoever you feel is part of your close education circle. And if that's someone completely outside of education that you just trust as a good person who's well credentialed, anyone that you want to bring into the system as a driver, you're capable of doing as long as they're, by the state's definition, credentialed for student transport.
Okay.
That's why we say, we'll take your driver shortage and turn it into a driver surplus. You could immediately have hundreds of potential drivers at your fingertips that wouldn't mind making some money in the mornings.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Melissa, thank you so much for putting this together. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys spending some time with us this morning. All right. And
Thank you.
Go ahead, Doreen. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say thank you also.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll be sending this out. If you have questions, please do feel free to reach out to Taylor, Brandon, or Doreen, and we can make sure that you get answers. And really thank you for taking the time to meet with us today.
Thank you.